The iron wheels of the asylum wagon scraped against the dirt road, and Hannah Elsworth pressed her face against the bars, watching the Colorado Territory landscape roll past with a desperate hunger for freedom she feared she'd never taste again. Her uncle sat beside the driver, his face set in grim satisfaction, occasionally glancing back at her with eyes that held no familial warmth. Marcus Elsworth had always been a hard man, but Hannah had never imagined he would go this far. When her aunt died 6 months ago, leaving Marcus as her sole guardian at 22 years old, she thought perhaps they might find some common ground in their shared grief. Instead, he had grown increasingly hostile, particularly after she refused his business associate's marriage proposal. "You are hysterical," Marcus had declared 3 days ago when she objected to selling her father's ranch, the property that was rightfully hers. "Your behavior is unnatural for a woman. You need treatment." 2 doctors he had paid handsomely agreed, never mind that Hannah had done nothing more than raise her voice and insist on her legal rights. In 1885, that was enough. A woman who defied male authority could be labeled insane, and once that label was applied, she had no recourse. The asylum in Denver awaited her, and with it, the loss of everything her parents had worked to build. The wagon hit a rut, and Hannah's shoulders slammed against the metal bars. She bit back a cry, refusing to give her uncle the satisfaction. The September sun beat down mercilessly, and dust coated her throat. They had been traveling for 2 days now from her home near Bandera, Texas, taking a circuitous route through New Mexico territory and now into Colorado. Marcus wanted to ensure she was far from anyone who knew her, anyone who might question his actions. As the wagon crested a hill, Hannah saw a small settlement ahead. It was barely more than a collection of weathered buildings clustered around a main street, but her heart leaped. People meant witnesses, and witnesses meant perhaps a slim chance at intervention, though she knew how unlikely that was. The driver pulled the wagon to a stop outside what appeared to be a general store. "Need to rest the horses," he muttered, "and get some water." Marcus nodded curtly. "Make it quick. I want to reach Denver by tomorrow evening." Hannah watched as both men climbed down, stretching their legs. Her uncle cast her one warning glance before heading into the store. The driver moved to tend the horses, leaving her alone in the cage-like wagon for a brief moment. She gripped the bars, testing them again, though she knew it was futile. Her hands were raw from trying, her dress torn and dusty. She must look like exactly what her uncle claimed she was, a madwoman. Tears of frustration burned her eyes, but she blinked them back. She would not cry. She would not give up. "That's an unusual cargo for a supply wagon." The voice came from beside the wagon, deep and measured. Hannah turned to find a man standing there, his hat tilted back to reveal a sun-weathered face and eyes the color of creek water after rain. He was tall, broad-shouldered in the way of men who worked with their hands, and he regarded her with an expression she could not quite read. "Please," Hannah said, her voice hoarse from thirst and disuse. "Please, you have to help me. I am not insane. My uncle is taking me to an asylum to steal my property." The man's expression did not change, but something flickered in those gray-green eyes. "That's a serious accusation, miss. It is the truth." Hannah pressed closer to the bars, desperate to make him understand. "My name is Hannah Elsworth. My father was Robert Elsworth. He owned a ranch near Bandera, Texas. When he and my mother died last year, the property passed to me. My uncle Marcus became my guardian, but he wants to sell the ranch to a mining company. I refused. 3 days ago, he had me declared insane by 2 doctors who never examined me properly. Plenty of women get sent to asylums, the man said, but his tone was neutral, not dismissive. Usually there is a reason. The reason is greed, Hannah said bitterly. I am educated. I can read and write and keep accounts. I ran my father's ranch for 2 years before he died, learning everything about the cattle and the land. But because I am a woman who will not submit quietly to being robbed, I am labeled hysterical. The man was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Hannah met his gaze steadily, willing him to see the truth in her eyes. She knew she looked desperate, but she hoped he might see something else too, the sharp awareness of someone in full possession of her faculties. "What's your name?" she asked suddenly. He seemed surprised by the question. "Quentin Jameson. You live here, Mr. Jameson. I have a ranch about 10 miles north, came into town for supplies. Then you understand about land and property rights. You understand what it means to work for something and build it with your own hands." Hannah's words tumbled out faster now, sensing she had limited time. "My father spent 20 years building that ranch. He taught me everything because I was all he had. He wanted me to carry on his legacy. If my uncle succeeds in this, everything my parents worked for will be destroyed. The mining company will tear up the land and poison the water, and my family's name will be forgotten." Quentin Jameson's jaw tightened slightly. Before he could respond, Marcus Elsworth emerged from the general store, his eyes narrowing when he saw the cowboy standing beside the wagon. "Move along," Marcus said sharply. "This does not concern you." Quentin did not move. "I was just talking to the lady." "She is not a lady. She is a disturbed woman being transported for her own good." Marcus's hand moved to rest on the pistol at his hip, a casual but clear threat. "Now I suggest you go about your business." "Seems to me she is talking pretty reasonably," Quentin observed. His own stance had not changed, but Hannah sensed a coiled readiness in him, like a spring wound tight. "She is cunning," Marcus said coldly. "The doctors warned me she would try to manipulate people with lies. It is part of her condition." "What condition exactly?" "Female hysteria and delusions of competence beyond her sex. She believes she can run a ranch and handle business affairs like a man." Marcus's lip curled. "It is unnatural and dangerous. Now step away from the wagon." Quentin's eyes flicked back to Hannah. She held his gaze, pouring every ounce of silent pleading into that look. He was her only chance, perhaps her last chance. Once they reached Denver, she would disappear into that asylum, and her uncle would be free to do as he pleased. "I would like to hear more about this ranch," Quentin said. "Seems odd to me that a young woman capable of running a spread would suddenly go mad right when her guardian wants to sell it." Marcus's face flushed with anger. "How dare you question my judgment regarding my own niece? I am her legal guardian and I am acting in her best interest. Then you would not mind proving it." Quentin's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "This town has a circuit judge coming through. He is staying at the boarding house right now, matter of fact. Why don't we ask him to have a conversation with your niece? If she is truly insane, it will be obvious. If she is not, well, seems to me there might be some questions about this arrangement." Hannah's heart nearly stopped. A judge. If she could speak to an actual judge, someone with the authority to investigate her uncle's claims, she might have a real chance. Marcus's hand tightened on his gun. "The matter is settled. I have legal documentation. Documentation can be forged." Quentin's hand had moved almost imperceptibly closer to his own weapon. "And even if it is not, a judge might want to verify the facts, unless you have something to hide." The tension stretched taut between the two men. Hannah held her breath, aware that this could turn violent in an instant. The driver had noticed the confrontation now and was moving back toward the wagon, his expression uncertain. "This is none of your concern, Cowboy," Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. "Walk away while you still can." "Cannot do that." Quentin's tone was almost apologetic. See, I have a problem with men who abuse their authority over women. Seen too much of it in my time, and something about this situation does not sit right with me. Jake, Marcus called to the driver, get this man away from my property. Jake, a heavy-set man with a weathered face, approached slowly. He looked between Quentin and Marcus, clearly uncomfortable. Look, mister, I am just driving the wagon. I do not want any trouble. Then maybe you should think about what kind of trouble you are already in, Quentin said, addressing Jake but keeping his eyes on Marcus. Transporting a sane woman to an asylum against her will is kidnapping. That is a hanging offense in Colorado territory. Jake went pale. I was told she was legally committed. By who? Him? Quentin jerked his head toward Marcus. Did you see any court orders, any proper documentation from a judge? He showed me papers from 2 doctors, Jake said uncertainly. Doctors he paid, Hannah interjected quickly, sensing an opening. Jake, please. You seem like a decent man. Just let Judge Morrison examine me. If he agrees I am insane, I will go quietly. But if he finds otherwise, you will be saving yourself from being an accessory to a crime. Jake looked genuinely distressed now. Mr. Elsworth, maybe we should talk to the judge. Just to be sure everything is legal and proper. I got a family. I cannot afford trouble with the law. Marcus's face had gone from red to purple. You were paid to do a job. I was paid to transport a legally committed patient, Jake corrected, growing bolder. If she is not legally committed, that is a different matter entirely. For a moment, Hannah thought her uncle might actually draw his gun. His hand trembled on the grip, and his eyes held a wild fury that frightened her more than anything else had. But then Quentin shifted his stance slightly, and Marcus seemed to recognize that he was outmatched. Whatever else he was, her uncle was not suicidal. Fine, Marcus spat. Let the judge see her. When he confirms she is insane, I will press charges against you for interference. That is fair, Quentin agreed. He looked at Jake. You have a key to that cage. Jake produced a ring of keys with shaking hands and unlocked the wagon door. Hannah climbed out stiffly, her legs cramping from the confined space. She swayed slightly, and Quentin's hand shot out to steady her elbow. His grip was firm but gentle, and Hannah felt an unexpected warmth spread through her at the contact. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded once, his expression still carefully neutral. Let's go see Judge Morrison. They made an odd procession walking down the main street, Quentin in the lead, Hannah beside him, Marcus following with a thunderous expression and Jake trailing nervously behind. A few townspeople stopped to stare, but no one interfered. In the West, you learn to mind your own business unless directly involved. The boarding house was a 2-story structure with a sagging porch. Quentin knocked firmly on the door, which was opened by a thin woman with suspicious eyes. We need to speak with Judge Morrison, Quentin said. It is urgent. The woman looked them over, her gaze lingering on Hannah's disheveled appearance and the bars of the wagon visible down the street. The judge is having his lunch. This cannot wait, Quentin said firmly. Tell him it is a matter of potential unlawful confinement. The woman's eyes widened slightly, and she disappeared inside. A few minutes later, she returned with a portly man in his 50s, his vest strained over a considerable belly. He had shrewd eyes that took in the scene with quick intelligence. I am Judge Benjamin Morrison, he said. What is this about unlawful confinement? Marcus stepped forward quickly. Your Honor, I apologize for this disturbance. My niece is being transported to an asylum in Denver for treatment of mental illness. This man, he gestured at Quentin, has interfered with her lawful transport based on nothing but her delusional claims. Judge Morrison's gaze moved to Hannah. And you are the niece in question. Yes, Your Honor. My name is Hannah Elsworth." She kept her voice steady and clear, aware that everything depended on the next few minutes. "I am 22 years old and I own a ranch near Bandera, Texas, inherited from my late father. My uncle became my guardian after my aunt's death 6 months ago. 3 days ago, after I refused to agree to the sale of my property, he had me declared insane by 2 physicians he paid. He is attempting to transport me to an asylum so he can assume control of my estate." "She is lying," Marcus said quickly. "Your Honor, she suffers from delusions and hysteria. She believes herself capable of managing business affairs and becomes violent when contradicted." "Have you been violent, Miss Elsworth?" the judge asked. "No, Your Honor. I raised my voice in an argument with my uncle about the ranch. That is the extent of my violence." Judge Morrison stroked his chin thoughtfully. "Do you have the commitment papers, Mr. Elsworth?" Marcus produced a folded sheaf of documents from his coat. The judge took them and spent several minutes reading carefully. Hannah's heart pounded as she watched his face, trying to discern his thoughts from his expression. Finally, Judge Morrison looked up. "These papers appear to be in order, signed by 2 physicians. However, the examination notes are extremely brief. They do not detail any specific symptoms or behaviors beyond unnatural willfulness and refusal to accept proper female limitations. That is concerning. With respect, Your Honor, those doctors are respected physicians in Texas," Marcus said. "Perhaps, but I am troubled by the timing and the cursory nature of their examination." The judge turned back to Hannah. "Miss Elsworth, I am going to ask you some questions. Answer them honestly and clearly." "Yes, Your Honor." "Can you tell me your date of birth and your parents' names?" "I was born on March 15, 1863. My father was Robert Thomas Elsworth, and my mother was Catherine Ann Elsworth, born Morgan." "What is the current year and who is the President of the United States?" "It is 1885 and the President is Grover Cleveland." "Can you read and write?" "Yes, Your Honor." "My mother was a school teacher before she married. She educated me from childhood." "Can you perform mathematical calculations?" "Yes, Your Honor. I kept the accounts for my father's ranch for 2 years before his death." Judge Morrison nodded slowly. "Tell me about this dispute with your uncle regarding the ranch." Hannah took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts carefully. "My father's ranch encompasses 3,000 acres with good water and grazing land. He built it from nothing, starting with a small herd and expanding over 20 years. When he and my mother died in a fever outbreak last year, the property passed to me according to his will. My uncle Marcus was named as trustee until I turned 25 or marry, but the land itself is mine. 6 months ago, my uncle approached me with an offer from the Consolidated Mining Corporation. They want to buy the ranch to access copper deposits they believe are on the property. The offer was substantial, but it would mean the destruction of everything my father built. I refused to agree to the sale. My uncle became increasingly angry, insisting that I did not understand business and should defer to his judgment. 2 weeks ago, he brought a business associate named Gerald Turnbull to the ranch. Mr. Turnbull proposed marriage, making it clear that the proposal was contingent on my agreement to sell the land after our marriage. I refused both the proposal and the sale. My uncle called me ungrateful and irrational. 3 days ago, he arrived with 2 doctors I had never met. They asked me a handful of questions, decided I was suffering from hysteria, and signed commitment papers. My uncle locked me in a room that night, and the next morning he put me in that wagon. "These are very serious accusations," Judge Morrison said. "Mr. Elsworth, how do you respond?" "She is making it sound more sinister than it is," Marcus said smoothly. "Yes, I arranged the marriage proposal because I thought it would be good for her to have a husband's guidance." Yes, I think selling the ranch is the wise financial decision. But I did not have her committed because of those disagreements. I had her committed because she has become increasingly unstable. She talks to herself, neglects her appearance, and has violent outbursts. I do not talk to myself, Hannah said firmly. And my appearance is neglected because I have been locked in a wagon for 2 days. As for violent outbursts, I challenge my uncle to name a single instance of actual violence. Marcus's eyes flashed. You threw a vase at me. I threw a vase at the wall, and it was after you told me you had already accepted Mr. Turnbull's proposal on my behalf without my consent. I was angry, yes, but I did not throw anything at you. Judge Morrison held up a hand. This is clearly a complex situation. Mr. Elsworth, you say Miss Elsworth is mentally unstable, but she presents as articulate and rational. She has answered all my questions appropriately and shows no signs of confusion or delusion. She is very cunning, Marcus insisted. The doctors warned me about this. She can seem normal for periods of time, but her underlying condition is dangerous. Then perhaps she should be examined by an independent physician, Judge Morrison said. Not one paid by either party, but someone who can provide an objective assessment. That is unnecessary, Marcus said quickly. The commitment is legal and proper. I disagree, the judge said. The standard for involuntary commitment is quite high, Mr. Elsworth. The individual must be a danger to themselves or others, or completely unable to care for themselves. Your niece appears to be neither. I am inclined to order a temporary suspension of this commitment pending a full hearing. Hannah felt hope surge through her chest so powerfully it was almost painful. Beside her, Quentin had not moved, but she sensed his satisfaction. Marcus's face had gone white. You cannot do this. I am her legal guardian. And I am a judge with jurisdiction over this territory, Morrison replied calmly. I can absolutely do this, and I am. Miss Elsworth will remain here under supervision until I can arrange for a proper psychiatric evaluation and a hearing on the matter of the commitment and your guardianship. Under whose supervision? Marcus demanded. Judge Morrison looked at Quentin. You are the one who brought this matter to my attention. Are you willing to take responsibility for Miss Elsworth's welfare until the hearing? Hannah's breath caught. She looked at Quentin, this stranger who had intervened when no one else would, and saw the flicker of hesitation in his eyes. It was a huge responsibility he was being asked to assume, and he barely knew her. I am willing, Quentin said after a moment. I have a ranch with a housekeeper who can serve as a chaperone. Miss Elsworth can stay there. Absolutely not, Marcus exploded. You cannot give my niece into the custody of some random cowboy. I am not giving her into his custody, Judge Morrison said. I am placing her under supervised care pending a legal review. Mr. Jameson has offered his ranch as a location for that supervision, and it seems appropriate. Miss Elsworth needs somewhere safe to stay where she can be evaluated properly. This is outrageous, Marcus sputtered. I will appeal this decision. You are welcome to try, though I doubt you will find a higher court that disagrees with my assessment. These commitment papers are flimsy at best. Judge Morrison turned back to Quentin. I will arrange for Dr. Sarah Pemberton from Denver to come conduct an examination. She is a physician who specializes in mental illness and has no connection to either party. The hearing will be held in 2 weeks. Yes, Your Honor, Quentin said. Hannah felt dizzy with relief and residual fear. She was not going to the asylum, at least not immediately. But she was also being placed in the care of a man she did not know, and her uncle was still her legal guardian with all the power that entailed. Nothing was truly resolved, but at least she had a chance now. Miss Elsworth, Judge Morrison said gently, Do you have any objection to staying at Mr. Jameson's ranch under these circumstances? No, Your Honor. I am grateful for his assistance. She looked at Quentin. Thank you for speaking up. Most people would have walked away. Most people are cowards, Quentin said simply. I will get my supplies loaded and we can head to my ranch before dark. The next hour passed in a blur. Marcus protested repeatedly, but Judge Morrison was immovable. Jake was clearly relieved to be released from his employment and left town quickly. Marcus remained at the boarding house, glowering at everyone, while Quentin finished his business and arranged for Hannah to have a proper meal at the small restaurant. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing, her mind spinning with the sudden reversal of her fortunes. She was not safe yet, not by any means, but she was no longer in that cage, no longer on her way to a living death in the asylum. When they finally set out for Quentin's ranch, the sun was lowering toward the western horizon. Hannah sat on the wagon seat beside him, acutely aware of his presence. He had not said much since leaving the judge, and she wondered what he was thinking. Why had he helped her? What did he expect in return? She knew enough of the world to understand that men rarely acted out of pure altruism, especially for women they did not know. You are very quiet, she said finally, unable to bear the silence any longer. Thinking, Quentin replied. About whether you made a mistake helping me, he glanced at her, and she was surprised to see a faint smile on his lips. No, thinking about how to handle the next 2 weeks. Your uncle is not going to give up easily. No, he is not. He has too much to lose. Hannah twisted her hands in her lap. Mr. Jameson, I need you to understand something. My uncle is a dangerous man when cornered. He might try to harm you for interfering. I can take care of myself. I am sure you can, but I want you to know what you are risking. The mining company is offering a fortune for my land. My uncle stands to receive a substantial finder's fee if he completes the sale. He will not let that go without a fight. Then we will fight, Quentin said calmly. I meant what I said to the judge. I have seen too many men abuse their power over women. If your story is true, and I believe it is, then you deserve to keep what is yours. Why do you believe me? Hannah asked. You do not know me. I could be lying about everything. Quentin was quiet for a moment, guiding the horses around a bend in the road. I grew up with a sister, he said finally. Emily was smart, smarter than me or my 2 brothers. She could read by the time she was 4, and by 10, she was helping my father with the ranch accounts. When he died, she was 14, and she knew more about running that ranch than any of us. But because she was a girl, nobody would listen to her. My older brother took over, and he ran the place into the ground within 3 years because he was too proud to take advice from a female. Emily tried to warn him, tried to show him the numbers, but he told her to stick to cooking and sewing. We lost everything. Emily ended up married to a man who beat her because that was the only option she had. She died 2 years later, pregnant with her 3rd child. She was 19 years old. His voice was flat, but Hannah heard the old pain underneath. I have never forgotten what it was like to watch her spirit break, to see intelligence and capability wasted because she was born the wrong sex. So when I saw you in that cage, telling me you were being punished for trying to keep what was yours, I believed you, because I have seen it before. Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. I am sorry about your sister, so am I. Every day, Quentin's hands tightened on the reins, but maybe I can make up for not being able to save her by helping you. They rode in silence after that, but it was a different kind of silence, warmer somehow. Hannah studied Quentin's profile in the fading light, seeing him not just as her unlikely savior, but as a man who carried his own wounds. He was perhaps 30, she guessed, with the weathered look of someone who had spent his life outdoors. His hands on the reins were scarred and calloused, the hands of a working rancher. There was a quiet strength to him that made her feel safer than she had in months. As the sky turned purple and gold with sunset, Quentin's ranch came into view. It was a modest spread, the house built of rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney. There was a barn, a corral with several horses, and beyond that, rolling grassland dotted with cattle. It was not as large as her father's ranch, but it was clearly well-maintained and prosperous. A woman emerged from the house as they pulled up, wiping her hands on her apron. She was in her 50s, with iron-gray hair pulled back in a bun and a no-nonsense expression. "You are late," she called. "I was starting to worry. Who is this?" "This is Miss Hannah Elsworth," Quentin said, climbing down and then offering Hannah his hand to help her descend. "She will be staying with us for a couple of weeks. It is a long story." The woman's eyes sharpened as she took in Hannah's disheveled appearance and exhausted face. "She looks half dead. Come inside, girl, you need food and a bath." "Thank you," Hannah said gratefully. "I do not mean to impose." "No imposition. I am Martha Greenwood. I keep house for Quentin and his ranch hands." She ushered Hannah toward the house with brisk efficiency. "Quentin, you can explain everything after I get her settled." Inside, the house was simple but comfortable, with handmade furniture and clean floors. Martha led Hannah to a small bedroom off the main living area and immediately began heating water for a bath. "You can tell me what happened while you get cleaned up," Martha said. "And do not leave anything out. I need to know what kind of trouble is coming to this ranch." Hannah found herself telling the entire story again while she bathed and then ate the generous meal Martha prepared. The housekeeper listened without interruption, her face growing progressively more angry. "Men like your uncle make me ashamed of my own sex for putting up with such nonsense," Martha said when Hannah finished. "Of course you should be able to keep your own property. The very idea of locking you up for that is barbaric." "I thought I was going to disappear," Hannah admitted quietly. "Once you are in an asylum, no one listens to you. You could be perfectly sane, but if you are labeled mad, every word you say is dismissed as delusion." "I would have died in there, forgotten." "Well, you are not there now, and if Quentin and I have anything to say about it, you never will be." Martha's expression softened slightly. "He is a good man, Quentin. Lost his way for a while after his sister died, but he came through it. If he has taken on your cause, he will see it through." Hannah felt another wave of gratitude mixed with something else, something she was not quite ready to name. "He told me about Emily. I am sorry. We all are. It was a terrible waste." Martha stood and collected the dishes. "You should rest. You look exhausted, and the next 2 weeks are going to be challenging." Hannah did not argue. She was so tired her bones ached, and the soft bed Martha had prepared looked like heaven. She fell asleep almost instantly, her last thought being that for the first time in 3 days, she was not locked in a cage. She woke to bright sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and bacon. For a disorienting moment, she did not remember where she was, but then it all came rushing back. The asylum wagon, Quentin's intervention, Judge Morrison's ruling. She was at Quentin's ranch, and she had 2 weeks to prove her sanity and fight for her freedom. Hannah dressed in the clean clothes Martha had left for her, a simple brown skirt and white blouse that were a bit large but serviceable. Her own dress was beyond saving, stained and torn from the journey. She braided her dark hair and pinned it up, trying to make herself look as presentable and sane as possible. In the kitchen, Martha was cooking while Quentin sat at the table reading a newspaper. He looked up when Hannah entered, and she saw something in his expression shift, though she could not identify what. "Good morning," he said. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in days. Thank you for taking me in. I know this is an awkward situation. We will manage." He gestured to the table. "Sit." Martha makes the best breakfast in 3 counties. Over breakfast, they discussed the practicalities of the situation. Quentin explained that he had 2 ranch hands, both older men who lived in the bunkhouse. Martha stayed in a small room off the kitchen. Hannah would have the guest room, and they would all serve as witnesses to her behavior and state of mind when Dr. Pemberton came to examine her. "The key is to be yourself," Quentin said. "Do not try to act overly agreeable or passive. Just be the person you naturally are. If you are truly sane, which I believe you are, that will be obvious to a competent physician." "What if she is not competent?" Hannah asked. "What if my uncle finds a way to influence her?" Judge Morrison trusts Dr. Pemberton. "She has a reputation for integrity. And I will be there during the examination to ensure everything is fair." Hannah nodded, taking comfort in his steady confidence. Over the next few days, she fell into a routine at the ranch. She helped Martha with household tasks, partly to earn her keep and partly to stay busy. She found that being useful helped quiet the anxiety that constantly churned in her stomach. But she also spent time outside, watching Quentin work with the cattle and horses. He was good at what he did, moving with an easy competence that came from years of experience. She found herself drawn to watching him, appreciating the way he treated his animals with firm kindness and his ranch hands with respect. On the 4th day, Quentin asked if she wanted to go riding. "You said you ran your father's ranch. I assume you can ride." "I practically grew up on horseback," Hannah said, unable to keep the eagerness from her voice. She had not ridden since her uncle locked her up, and she missed it desperately. Quentin saddled a gentle mare for her and his own stallion for himself, and they rode out across his land. The September air was crisp and clear, and Hannah felt some of the tension drain from her shoulders as they moved through the grassland. "Your ranch is beautiful," she said. "How long have you had it?" "6 years. I bought it with money I saved working cattle drives and mining for a few seasons. It is not as big as what you described your father having, but it supports me in a small herd. Size is not everything. My father always said a well-managed small ranch is worth more than a poorly run large one." Quentin smiled slightly. "He sounds like he was a wise man." "He was. I miss him every day." Hannah paused, then asked, "Do you think I am foolish for refusing to sell? The mining company's offer was substantial. I could live comfortably for the rest of my life on that money." "Do you think you are foolish?" "No. The ranch is my family's legacy. It is who I am. And beyond that, mining would destroy the land. The water would be poisoned, the grazing ruined. My father loved that land, and I cannot bear the thought of it being torn apart for copper." "Then you are not foolish," Quentin said simply. "Money is not worth losing your soul over." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, and Hannah felt something shift between them. She had been so focused on her legal troubles that she had not allowed herself to think about Quentin as anything other than her benefactor. But now, watching the way the sunlight caught his hair and seeing the quiet understanding in his eyes, she felt a flutter of something more. It was too soon, she told herself firmly. She was in crisis, dependent on his charity. Any feelings she might be developing were probably just gratitude mixed with fear. She could not trust her own emotions right now. But that night, as they sat on the porch after dinner watching the stars emerge, Hannah found herself acutely aware of Quentin's presence beside her. He was telling her about his plans to expand the ranch, and she listened with genuine interest, offering suggestions based on her own experience. "You really do know ranching," he said at one point, sounding impressed. "Your uncle is an idiot for thinking you could not manage your property." "My uncle is greedy, which often comes with stupidity," Hannah replied. "But thank you." "For what?" "For believing in me. For treating me like I have value beyond being a piece of property to be managed." Quentin turned to look at her, and in the starlight his eyes were dark and serious. "You have considerable value, Hannah Elsworth. Any fool can see that." Her breath caught at the use of her first name and the warmth in his voice. For a moment, they just looked at each other, and Hannah felt the air between them charged with possibility. Then Quentin cleared his throat and looked away, and the moment passed, leaving her both relieved and disappointed. The next week passed in a strange blend of routine and tension. Hannah helped around the ranch, rode with Quentin most afternoons, and tried not to think too hard about the hearing that loomed ahead. Martha had become a fierce ally, declaring loudly to anyone who would listen that Hannah was the sanest woman she had ever met, and that her uncle should be horsewhipped. But there were difficult moments, too. On the 8th day, Hannah woke from a nightmare in which she was back in the asylum wagon, and this time, no one came to help her. She found herself in the kitchen at 3 in the morning, shaking and unable to go back to sleep. Quentin found her there, emerging from his room in response to the noise she made preparing tea. "Bad dreams?" he asked quietly. Hannah nodded, not trusting her voice. He sat down across from her. "Want to talk about it? I dreamed that Judge Morrison changed his mind. That you took me back to the wagon and my uncle took me to Denver. I was screaming that I was sane, but no one would listen." Her hands trembled around the teacup. "That is not going to happen. You cannot know that. Dr. Pemberton could decide my uncle is right. The judge could rule in his favor. I could still end up in that asylum." "Then we will fight it," Quentin said firmly. "We will appeal, we will find lawyers, we will do whatever it takes. You are not going to disappear into some institution, Hannah. I promise you that." "Why do you care so much?" she asked, the question bursting out before she could stop it. "You did not know me a week ago. This is not your fight." Quentin was quiet for a long moment. "At first I helped because of Emily, because I could not save her, and maybe I thought saving you would somehow make up for that. But that is not why I care now." "Then why?" He met her eyes, and she saw something vulnerable in his expression that she had not seen before. "Because in the last week I have come to know you. I have seen your intelligence, your courage, your determination. I have watched you help Martha without being asked, seen you gentle with the horses, listened to you talk about ranching with more knowledge than most men I know. And I have realized that you are remarkable, Hannah. You deserve to keep your land and your freedom not just because it is right, but because losing you to some asylum would be a tragedy for the world." Hannah's heart was pounding. "Quentin, I know this is complicated," he said quickly. "I know you are dealing with enough without me adding to it, but I needed you to know that you matter, not just as a cause to fight for, but as a person. As a woman, I have come to admire greatly." She could not speak past the lump in her throat. Instead, she reached across the table and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, and they sat like that in the quiet kitchen as the night slowly gave way to dawn. Dr. Sarah Pemberton arrived at the ranch 3 days before the hearing. She was a tall woman in her 40s with shrewd eyes and a professional demeanor that gave away nothing of her thoughts. Judge Morrison accompanied her, along with Marcus, who looked like he had been chewing nails. "Miss Elsworth," Dr. Pemberton said after the introductions were made, "I am here to conduct a thorough psychiatric evaluation. I will be asking you a series of questions and observing your behavior over the next several hours. Do you understand?" "Yes, doctor," Hannah said, keeping her voice calm despite the terror churning in her stomach. The examination was grueling. Dr. Pemberton asked questions about Hannah's childhood, her education, her relationship with her parents and her uncle. She asked about Hannah's dreams and fears, her daily routines, her understanding of social norms. She presented various scenarios and asked how Hannah would respond. She tested Hannah's memory, her reasoning ability, her emotional control. Through it all, Hannah answered honestly and completely, aware that Quentin and Judge Morrison were watching from across the room. Her uncle sat in the corner, his face growing progressively more sour as Hannah demonstrated time and again that she was in full possession of her faculties. After 4 hours, Dr. Pemberton finally sat back. "I would like to speak with others in the household now. Mr. Jameson, Mrs. Greenwood, may I interview you separately?" Over the next 2 hours, Dr. Pemberton spoke with Quentin, Martha, and even the 2 ranch hands. She observed Hannah interacting with the horses and helping Martha prepare lunch. She watched how Hannah moved through the household, how she spoke to people, how she handled herself. Finally, as the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, Dr. Pemberton gathered everyone in the main room. "I have completed my evaluation," she said, "and I am prepared to give my professional opinion to Judge Morrison." Hannah's heart felt like it might burst from her chest. Quentin moved closer to her, his presence a solid comfort. "Miss Hannah Elsworth is not insane," Dr. Pemberton said clearly. "She shows no signs of hysteria, delusion, or any other mental illness. She is intelligent, articulate, and fully capable of managing her own affairs. The commitment papers signed by the Texas physicians are, in my professional opinion, completely without merit." Hannah felt her knees go weak with relief. Quentin's hand found hers and squeezed. "Furthermore," Dr. Pemberton continued, "I am troubled by the circumstances of this case. Miss Elsworth's commitment came immediately after she refused to agree to a property sale her guardian wanted. This timing suggests that the commitment was motivated by financial interests, rather than genuine concern for her welfare. I will be recommending to Judge Morrison that the commitment be permanently voided, and that Miss Elsworth's guardianship arrangement be reevaluated." "This is ridiculous," Marcus exploded. "You spent 1 day with her. Those doctors knew her for weeks." "Those doctors spent less than an hour examining her, according to their own notes," Dr. Pemberton said coldly. "And their diagnostic criteria consisted entirely of behaviors that are perfectly normal for an intelligent, independent woman. If refusing an unwanted marriage proposal and objecting to the sale of one's property constitutes insanity, then half the women in America should be institutionalized." Judge Morrison stood. "Thank you, Dr. Pemberton. Your report will be entered into the record. The hearing will proceed as scheduled in 3 days, but based on this evaluation, I am prepared to rule that Miss Elsworth is mentally competent to manage her own affairs." Marcus's face had gone purple. "You cannot do this. I am her legal guardian." "A guardianship that may be terminated if it is found to be contrary to the ward's best interests," Morrison replied, "which this clearly is. Mr. Elsworth, I suggest you retain a lawyer. You are going to need one." The next 3 days were a whirlwind. Judge Morrison arranged for a hearing to be held in the small town's courthouse. Lawyers were summoned, documents were examined, and testimony was taken. Marcus brought in character witnesses who claimed Hannah was difficult and unnatural. Hannah's lawyer, arranged by Quentin, brought in Dr. Pemberton's report and testimony from Martha, Quentin, and the ranch hands about Hannah's completely normal behavior. The hearing lasted 2 full days. Hannah testified about her uncle's attempts to coerce her into marriage and the property sale. She presented her father's will and ranch records, demonstrating her competence in managing the estate. Quentin testified about finding her in the wagon and the desperation in her eyes that had convinced him to intervene. In the end, Judge Morrison ruled decisively. The commitment was voided. Marcus's guardianship was terminated on grounds that he had abused his authority for personal financial gain. Hannah was declared legally competent, and granted full control of her estate. Furthermore, Marcus was ordered to pay all legal costs and was warned that if he attempted any further action against Hannah, he would face criminal charges. When the gavel came down, Hannah felt 10 years of weight lift from her shoulders. She was free. She was truly free. Marcus left the courthouse without looking at her, his face twisted with impotent rage. Hannah knew she had not seen the last of him, that he would continue to be a problem. But for now she had won, and that was enough. Outside the courthouse, Quentin was waiting. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Like I can breathe again," Hannah said. She looked up at him, this man who had saved her life and asked for nothing in return. "I do not know how to thank you, Quentin. You risked so much for a stranger." "You are not a stranger anymore," he said quietly. They stood there in the fading afternoon light, and Hannah felt the truth of what had been growing between them over the past 2 weeks crystallize into something undeniable. She had feelings for this man, deep feelings that went far beyond gratitude. "What will you do now?" Quentin asked. "Will you go back to Texas?" "I have to," Hannah said. "I need to return to my ranch, make sure everything is in order. My uncle has had access to it for months. I need to assess what damage he might have done." "That makes sense." Quentin's voice was carefully neutral, but Hannah heard the disappointment underneath. "Come with me," she said impulsively. He looked startled. "What?" "Come with me to Texas. Help me get the ranch back in order. You know cattle and land management, and I could use someone I trust." She paused, then added more softly, "I could use you. Hannah, I have my own ranch here." "I know. And I am not asking you to abandon it, but maybe you could stay for a few weeks, help me sort things out. Your ranch hands can manage things here with Martha's oversight." Quentin studied her face, and she wondered what he saw there. Hope, certainly, affection, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of love. "All right," he said finally. "I will come with you." The journey to Texas took 2 weeks, traveling by train and then horseback for the final leg. Hannah felt her anticipation grow as they got closer to home. She had been away for nearly a month now, and she worried constantly about what they would find. When her father's ranch finally came into view, Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. The house stood as it always had, weathered but solid, with the mountains rising behind it. The land stretched out in familiar patterns, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance. But as they rode closer, she noticed signs of neglect. The fences needed mending, the barn door hung crooked, and the house itself looked shabby in a way it never had when her father was alive. A man emerged from the barn as they rode up, and Hannah's heart lifted. "Tom," she called. Tom Fletcher had been her father's foreman for 15 years. He was in his 60s now, grizzled and weathered, but his eyes were sharp. He stopped short when he saw Hannah, his mouth dropping open. "Miss Hannah, we heard you were being taken to an asylum. Your uncle said you had gone mad." "I am not mad, Tom. My uncle lied." "It is a long story, but I am back now, and I am resuming control of the ranch." Tom's face split into a broad grin. "Thank the Lord. Things have gone to hell since Elsworth took over. He fired half the hands and has been letting the mining company surveyors trample all over the property." Hannah's jaw tightened. "Not anymore. Tom, this is Quentin Jameson. He is a rancher from Colorado and a friend. He's going to help me get things back in order." Over the next few days, the extent of Marcus's mismanagement became clear. He had indeed fired experienced hands and replaced them with cheaper labor that did not know what they were doing. He had allowed the mining company to conduct extensive surveys, tearing up fences and disturbing the cattle. He had neglected basic maintenance, apparently planning to let the property degrade so the mining company could buy it cheaper. But he had not succeeded in selling, and now Hannah was back. She threw herself into the work of restoration with fierce determination. Quentin worked beside her, his experience and strength invaluable. Together, they rebuilt fences, repaired buildings, and began the process of restoring order to the ranch. Hannah found herself falling into an easy partnership with Quentin. They worked side by side during the day, talking through problems and solutions. In the evenings, they sat on the porch and planned the next day's tasks. He treated her as an equal partner, respecting her knowledge and deferring to her on decisions about her own property. But there was more than partnership between them now. Hannah felt it in the way her heart lifted when she saw him each morning, in the warmth that spread through her when he smiled, in the way her hand seemed to find his naturally as they walked together in the evenings. One night, about 6 weeks after they had arrived in Texas, they were sitting on the porch watching the stars. The ranch was finally beginning to look like itself again, and Hannah felt a deep satisfaction in what they had accomplished. "I need to go back to Colorado soon," Quentin said quietly. "I have been away too long. My ranch needs me." Hannah's heart clenched. She had known this was coming, but she was not ready. "I understand. Do you?" He turned to look at her. "Because I am not sure I do." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I have spent the last 2 months with you, Hannah, and the thought of leaving makes me feel like I am tearing off my own arm." His voice was low and intense. "I came to Texas to help you, but somewhere along the way I fell in love with you." Hannah's breath stopped. "Quentin." "I know the timing is terrible," he continued. "You have just gotten your freedom back. You are just starting to rebuild your life. The last thing you need is me complicating things with feelings." "It is not a complication," Hannah said, her voice shaking, "because I fell in love with you too." They stared at each other in the starlight, and then Quentin was pulling her into his arms and kissing her. It was a deep, desperate kiss that spoke of weeks of restrained longing. Hannah melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, her heart soaring. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quentin rested his forehead against hers. "What are we going to do?" he asked. "You have your ranch here and I have mine in Colorado." "I have been thinking about that," Hannah said. "Quentin, would you consider combining our operations? You could bring your herd here, or we could split our time between both properties. Tom is perfectly capable of managing things here when I am gone, and Martha can do the same in Colorado. You would do that. Leave your father's ranch for part of the year." "My father wanted me to be happy and to carry on his legacy. I can do both. I can keep this ranch running and successful while also building a life with you." She cupped his face in her hands. "I love you, Quentin Jameson. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you treat me like an equal. I do not want to lose you." "You will never lose me," he said fiercely. "Hannah, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner in all things?" "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." They married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony in Bandera with Tom and Martha standing as witnesses. Hannah wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved, and Quentin wore his best suit. Judge Morrison had traveled from Colorado to officiate, declaring that after everything they had been through, he wanted to see their happy ending. Marcus did not attend, having retreated to somewhere in the east after his humiliating defeat. Hannah occasionally heard rumors of him trying to salvage his reputation, but she did not care. He had no power over her anymore, and she had more important things to focus on. The first year of their marriage was busy and challenging as they worked out the logistics of managing 2 ranches. They decided to spend spring and summer in Texas, taking advantage of the growing season there, and fall and winter in Colorado, where Quentin's smaller operation could be managed more easily in the harsh weather. It was not always easy. There were disagreements about management decisions, frustrations with the constant travel, and moments of exhaustion when juggling 2 properties, seemed overwhelming. But through it all, Hannah and Quentin supported each other, their love deepening with each challenge they overcame together. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Hannah discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She had lost her own mother too young, and the thought of bringing a child into the world without that guidance frightened her. But Quentin was steadfast in his support. "You are going to be a wonderful mother," he told her, holding her close, "and I will be here every step of the way." Their son was born in October 1887, a healthy baby boy with Quentin's gray-green eyes and Hannah's dark hair. They named him Robert after Hannah's father, and she cried as she held him for the first time, overwhelmed with love and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered to Quentin as he sat beside her hospital bed. "For what? For saving me, for believing in me, for giving me this beautiful life." "You saved yourself, Hannah. I just opened the door. You are the one who walked through it and built something amazing." As their son grew, Hannah marveled at the life they had created together. Robert was raised on both ranches, learning to ride almost before he could walk, absorbing knowledge about cattle and land management from both his parents. Tom Fletcher became a beloved grandfather figure, teaching the boy all the things Hannah's father had taught her. 2 years after Robert was born, their daughter arrived. Emily Quentin insisted she be named after his sister. "She deserves to be remembered," he said, "and maybe our Emily will have all the opportunities my sister never got." Little Emily was fierce and independent from the start, keeping her older brother on his toes and showing early signs of the same intelligence that had gotten her mother labeled insane. But Emily would grow up in a different world, raised by parents who valued her mind as much as her heart. Over the years, Hannah and Quentin's combined ranching operation became one of the most successful in both Texas and Colorado. They were known for their innovative practices, their fair treatment of workers, and their commitment to sustainable land management. Hannah earned a reputation as a brilliant businesswoman, and though there were still men who scoffed at the idea of a female rancher, her success spoke for itself. But more than the professional success, it was the personal happiness that mattered most to Hannah. Every morning, she woke beside the man who had risked everything to save her. Every day, she worked land that was truly hers, building something lasting and meaningful. Every evening, she sat with her family and felt the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Quentin surprised her with a gift. It was a small plaque that read, "Hannah Elsworth Jameson, rancher, wife, mother, free woman. In case you ever forget what you are," he said with a smile. Hannah traced the words with her fingers, remembering that terrified woman in the asylum wagon who thought her life was over. She thought about Judge Morrison's intervention, Quentin's courageous choice to help a stranger, and all the small decisions and moments of bravery that had led to this beautiful life. "I will never forget," she promised. "How could I, when I am reminded every single day by the life we have built together?" That night, as they sat on the porch of the Texas ranch watching their children play in the yard, Hannah felt a profound sense of peace. She had been tested by fire and had emerged stronger. She had faced down injustice and had won. And most importantly, she had found a partner who saw her not as property or a problem to be managed, but as an equal worthy of love and respect. Tom Fletcher joined them on the porch, moving slower now in his advancing age but still sharp as ever. "Your father would be proud of what you have done with this place, Miss Hannah," he said. "Not just keeping it running but making it better." "I hope so," Hannah said. "That is all I ever wanted, to honor his legacy." "You have done more than that. You have created your own legacy." Tom looked out at the land with satisfaction. "And those children of yours will carry it on. I have been teaching young Robert about the water management system your father developed, and the boy understands it better than most grown men." "He has a good teacher," Quentin said. "And Emily?" Hannah asked, smiling as she watched her 4-year-old daughter attempting to lasso a fence post with fierce determination. "That one is going to run the whole state someday," Tom said with a chuckle. "She has her mother's spirit and then some." As the sun set over the Texas plains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Hannah leaned against Quentin's shoulder. He wrapped his arm around her, and they watched their children play in the fading light. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had walked past that wagon?" Hannah asked quietly. "Every day," Quentin admitted. "And every day I thank God I did not. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Hannah. You and our children and this life we have built. I would not change a single moment of it. Not even the difficult parts. The fights with my uncle, the legal battles, the exhausting work of managing 2 ranches. Especially not those parts, because they are what made us who we are. They are what taught us we could overcome anything together." He kissed the top of her head. "You are the strongest person I know, Hannah Jameson, and I am honored to be your husband." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I love you, Quentin. Thank you for seeing me when no one else would. Thank you for believing in me." "Always," he promised. "For the rest of our lives." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Hannah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had been declared insane, locked in a cage, destined for a living death in an asylum. But one man's courage and compassion had changed everything. Quentin had not just saved her life. He had given her the opportunity to reclaim it and build something even better than what she had lost. Their children came running up to the porch, breathless and laughing. Robert, now 7, was telling a complicated story about the game they had been playing. Emily was tugging on her mother's skirt, demanding to be picked up. Hannah lifted her daughter into her lap, marveling at the solid weight of her, the beautiful reality of her existence. "Mama, tell us the story," Emily demanded. "About how Papa saved you from the bad men." It had become one of their favorite bedtime stories, though Hannah and Quentin always softened some of the harsher details for young ears. But the core of it remained, the tale of a woman who refused to give up her freedom and a man who helped her fight for it. "All right," Hannah said, settling Emily more comfortably. "But then it is time for bed, both of you." "Papa too," Robert insisted. "Papa has to tell his part." So they told the story together, as they often did, each filling in the details from their own perspective. Quentin described seeing the woman in the cage and making the choice to intervene. Hannah talked about her fear and hope, and how Quentin's courage had given her a chance to fight. They spoke of Judge Morrison's fairness, Martha's fierce support, and the moment when Dr. Pemberton had declared Hannah sane. "And then Papa asked Mama to marry him," Emily asked, even though she knew the answer. "And then Papa asked Mama to marry him," Quentin confirmed. "Because by then, I loved her more than anything in the world." "And Mama said yes because she loved Papa too," Robert added, completing the familiar refrain. "Exactly right," Hannah said, hugging her daughter close. "And then we got married and had you too, which made our family complete." After the children were tucked into bed, Hannah and Quentin returned to the porch. The night was cool and clear, filled with the sounds of crickets and the distant lowing of cattle. "You think they understand how important that story is?" Hannah asked. "Not just as a bedtime tale, but as a reminder of what we had to fight for." "They will," Quentin said. "As they get older, they will understand more, especially Emily. She's going to face many of the same battles you did, just for being a smart, strong-willed woman. But she will have us to teach her how to fight, and she will have Robert to stand beside her, the way I stood beside you." I want them to know they can overcome anything, Hannah said. That injustice can be defeated, that love is worth fighting for, and that they should never let anyone tell them they are less than they are. They will know, Quentin assured her. Because they have you as an example. You are proof of all those things, Hannah. In the years that followed, Hannah and Quentin continued to build their legacy. They expanded both ranches carefully, never overextending but always looking for ways to improve. They became known for giving opportunities to workers others would not hire, particularly women who had been dismissed as incapable or troublesome. Hannah took a special interest in mentoring young women who showed an aptitude for ranching or business, sharing the knowledge her father had given her. When Robert turned 18, he took on increasing responsibility for the Colorado ranch, showing the same steady competence his father had. Emily, at 16, was already being consulted on major decisions about the Texas property, her sharp mind and innovative ideas impressing even the most skeptical old-timers. On a warm spring evening in 1902, Hannah and Quentin celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary. Their children had arranged a party, inviting friends and neighbors from both ranches. Martha was there, now in her 70s but still spry, declaring loudly that she had known all along these two were meant for each other. Tom Fletcher had passed away the previous winter, but his legacy lived on in the thriving ranch he had helped build and maintain. Judge Morrison had also been invited and made the journey from Colorado despite his advanced age. "I have presided over many cases in my career," he said in a toast. "But none have given me more satisfaction than the day I ruled in favor of Miss Hannah Elsworth. She is proof that justice, when properly administered, can change lives." As the party wound down and the guests departed, Hannah found herself alone with Quentin under the stars once again. It had become their ritual, these quiet moments at the end of the day when they could reflect on everything they had built together. 15 years, Hannah said wonderingly. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, and sometimes it feels like it all happened yesterday. "I remember every moment," Quentin said. "From the second I saw you in that wagon to right now, every fight, every triumph, every laugh, every tear, all of it led us here." "I would not change any of it," Hannah said, "even the hard parts, even the terrifying parts. Because they gave me you and our children and this beautiful life." Quentin pulled her close, and they swayed together in the moonlight, moving to music only they could hear. Hannah rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and felt complete contentment. "Do you ever wonder what would have become of me if you had not stopped?" she asked. It was a question she had asked before, at various points in their marriage, always when she was feeling particularly grateful. "I try not to," Quentin admitted. "The thought of you trapped in that place, your spirit broken, your life wasted, it is too painful to contemplate. But you were never going to stay trapped, Hannah. Even if I had not helped, you would have found a way to fight. You are too strong, too determined to ever truly be defeated." "I like to think so," Hannah said. "But I am glad I did not have to find out. I am glad you were there, Quentin. I am glad you chose courage over convenience." "It was not courage," he said. "It was recognition. I saw myself in you, or rather, I saw Emily. I saw what she could have been if she had been given the chance, and I could not walk away from that." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, just holding each other. Around them, the ranch settled into its nighttime rhythms. Cattle lowed softly in the distance. An owl hooted from the barn. The wind rustled through the grass with a sound like whispered secrets. "I have been thinking about the future," Hannah said eventually. "About what happens when we are gone and the children inherit all of this. I want to make sure it is protected, that our wishes are clear and legally binding. I do not want Emily to face what I faced. with someone trying to take what is rightfully hers. "We will talk to lawyers," Quentin agreed. "We will set up trusts and protections, make sure both children inherit equally and that no one can challenge their rights. Robert would never try to cheat his sister, but we need to protect them from outsiders who might. And I want to establish something more," Hannah continued. "A foundation, perhaps, to help women in situations like mine. Women who are being declared insane or incompetent simply because they will not submit to male authority. We have the resources now to make a real difference." Quentin smiled. "I think that is a wonderful idea. Your father would be proud." "I hope so. I hope he is looking down and seeing that I honored his legacy in the way that mattered most, by being true to myself and fighting for what was right." As they finally headed inside for the night, Hannah took one last look at the land stretching out under the stars. This ranch, this life, this family, they were all testaments to the power of courage and love. She had been saved from a terrible fate, but more than that, she had been given the chance to thrive, to build, to create something meaningful. In bed that night, wrapped in Quentin's arms, Hannah thought about the girl she had been at 22, locked in that asylum wagon and terrified of the future. If she could go back and tell that girl what was coming, what would she say? That everything would be all right, that rescue was coming, that she would find love and happiness beyond her wildest dreams. Yes, all of those things. But most importantly, she would tell that girl to never give up hope, because even in the darkest moments when all seemed lost, there was always the possibility of change. One act of courage, one person willing to stand up for what was right, could alter the course of a life. Quentin had been that person for her, and together they had built something beautiful. Their love story had begun with injustice and fear, but it had blossomed into something strong and lasting, a partnership that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger each time. As Hannah drifted off to sleep, she felt Quentin's steady breathing beside her and knew that this moment of peace and contentment was worth every struggle they had faced. She had fought for her freedom and her land, and she had won. But more than that, she had found a love that made every fight worthwhile, a partner who saw her as an equal, and a family that was her greatest achievement. The asylum wagon was a distant memory now, a nightmare that had ended the moment Quentin Jameson stopped and chose to listen. He had proven she was sane when the world wanted to call her mad. He had taken her home, not to his home but to the home they had built together, piece by piece, choice by choice, day by day. And as she fell asleep in the Texas ranch house, under the same roof where she had been born, Hannah knew that her story had ended exactly as it should. With love, with family, with freedom, and with the deep satisfaction of a life lived on her own terms. She was Hannah Elsworth Jameson, rancher, wife, mother, and above all, a free woman who had fought for her rights and won. And that was the greatest victory of all.